Before beginning task 1, don't forget to open the SPSS file Exam Anxiety and the Word document entitled SPSS Module 1 Exercises. When we open an SPSS file by double-clicking on the file name, we are confronted with one of two displays. The first display, shown here, is called the Data View. Notice in the bottom left-hand corner there are two tabs, one headed Data View, the other Variable View. The Data View contains all of the data that's been entered on our file and enables us to see all of the values that have been typed in. If we click across to the Variable View, you'll notice that it contains each of the variables about which we've collected information. The first variable in row 1, here an identifier called code. 2, revise, which is the number of hours of revision a student spent studying for an exam. 3, exam performance mark. 4, an anxiety test score. And 5, the gender of a particular student. The gender obviously being male or female. When we return to the data view, you'll see that each of these variables correspond to an individual variable. Each row in the file corresponds to an individual student. So row 1 is student number 41, who revised for 15 hours, achieved 20% in the exam, 82.27 in the anxiety test, and was a female. And I'll let you in on that little secret later. We're going to introduce a new variable to our file called grade, and we're going to use the exam performance marks to help us to allocate appropriate values. Return to our data file to the variable view. Click on row 4 and you'll notice it becomes highlighted like this. Go up to Edit, select Insert Variable, and you'll notice SPSS has inserted a new variable. We're going to call this new variable grade, and so we click in that column and type in grade. SPSS assumes all variables to be numeric unless we otherwise specify it, so we're quite happy to leave this as numeric because we're going to use the codes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to indicate the grade of the student. The width tells us that we have a possible 8 digits we can express in this particular variable. We are only going to be using 1, but because it's a small file, it's okay to leave that as 8. If, on the other hand, you have a large number of variables, you may want to restrict these widths to a more appropriate size to allow display of as many variables as possible. Since our codes are going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we don't need any decimal points, so we're going to reduce that down to 0 by clicking in the right-hand corner, and that reveals up-down arrows. I'm going to type in the word grade in the label. This will be what will appear in all of the output of analysis and charts that I produce. We have no values, and we're not going to mention these other columns for the time being. Now we've created the new word, the new variable called grade, we now need to allocate some values in there. But before we do, let's take a little bit closer look at how SPSS describes variables. The description for name here, okay, some variables, some characters are excluded from variable names, so no spaces or special characters can be used. Use meaningful names in case somebody else comes back later to use your file. The type, the two most common are numeric and string. Numeric is self-evident. String refers to alphabetic characters. So they may be comments or they may be single alpha codes. Less commonly, that can be currency and date. The width we've already discussed, and you can reduce this but in the same way as we did with the decimals by clicking in the right-hand corner. Similarly, decimal places, the default is 2, but we changed this a little bit earlier. Label, this is shown in all output. make sure it's meaningful. This is the part that we're going to work on now. Labels assign meaningful values assign meaningful labels to the variables. For example, for the code 1 in gender corresponds to female, 2 corresponds to male. We're now going to do this for grade. The rest of these will become more important as time wears on. We're going to define what the codes mean through the value specification for grade. Now this is the grades as we've seen them. Okay, we're now going to add these codes and these descriptions for the codes. So we're going to return back to our file and select the variable view. We're going to the values column and we're going to click in the right hand corner and notice value labels comes up. We're going to enter 1 and 1 is going to stand for fail, the lowest value for the lowest achievement. Add this code and go back. 2 is going to be a pass. Add that one. 3 will correspond to a credit. Add that one. 4 to a distinction. Add that one, and lastly 5 corresponds to a high distinction. Don't forget to add that. Now we have all of our codes in, click OK, and you'll notice the codes have appeared on here. Returning to the data view, however, that has had no impact on it because there was no value in there. The next step will be to actually change the exam to produce, or use the exam mark to produce a value for grade.